The Boogeyman is based on a story by Stephen King. That's the recent 2023 movie, none of the other 6 movies that are also called Boogeyman. Let's see if it's worth recommending, besides the fact that it's got Jackie from Yellow Jackets in it. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
What's up?
It's a reinvigorated Tim. I'm not recorded in a little bit. Yeah, so Tim's not back full time yet. This is a little sly, like, recording we're throwing in there.
Being a little cheeky.
Little cheeky. Because Tim went to see The Boogeyman and said, go see The Boogeyman and we can talk about The Boogeyman. And I said, okay, I'll go see Boogeyman. So we're here.
So excited.
So our movie podcast, we talk about a film that we watched. It's that simple. We'll start spoiler free as we always do, but we are indeed going to talk about The Boogeyman, which is currently in the cinemas. And it stars Sophie.
Will it be for long? I mean, Flash, Spider-Verse, Transformers.
I doubt it. I'm pretty sure today is the last possible day I could have seen it. I think it's gone tomorrow at my local cinema. But so yeah, this comes from the director of what was that called? Host? Well, yeah, the early pandemic movie where they're all on Zoom. Like, it was the director who did that, Rob Savage, and it stars Sophie Thatcher, who most people will probably know from Yellow Jackets. She plays Jackie on that show. And then, so she's like the teenage daughter. We've got a dad played by Chris Messina, who you've probably seen in things. He's one of those guys that pops up a lot. And then there's the little sister, who's the other main character. And yeah,
young Princess Leia.
Is she?
Yeah, she's young Princess Leia in the Obi-Wan series.
She probably wants to forget she did that. That's a stain on her filmography, frankly. Yes. So it's a typical supernatural.
And you got the polka dot man from Suicide Squad.
He that is true. He was in that. Although I think I will always remember him from The Dark Knight, because he's the guy that Harvey Dent interrogates at one point, and he's got like a really creepy look on him. He's just
super small part, but very memorable.
Yeah, he's got one of those faces where he's just got a bit of a like intense look to him, which I'm sure he's turning on a bit for the camera, because he always seems to take these roles where he's So
he's a bona fide a horror fan, it seems like, and comic book fan, because he actually writes a comic book called Count Crowley, which is actually pretty good. I'd recommend it. It's kind of about like a jaded alcoholic horror host who, surprise, finds out monsters are real and then fights them. But it's fun. It's a good little book.
Oh, very good. So as for the premise, there's an evil presence that comes out of the closet in the dark and kills kids, and well, the whole family really is the idea. And we have the slow build of like the kids starting to become aware of it, and the threat rises. That's basically it. I don't really want to say anything else. It's the setup is pretty simple and typical of the supernatural, something spooky's in the house coming to kill you genre, which is the official
my
name.
favorite genre.
Yeah, of the genre. So yeah, we'll get into it. So Tim, how did you feel about this one?
So I was actually pretty excited going into this. I think we must have talked about it when we did kind of our beginning of the year episode of what we're looking forward to. And the one thing you didn't mention is that this is based on a Stephen King story. So obviously, I'm the huge Stephen King fan on the podcast. It was just a short story that's in I believe it's the Night Shift collection. It was originally published in I want to say Cavalier magazine, which is like a men's magazine, which I don't know if you know that about Stephen King, but like a lot of his early writing career, when he would sell short horror stories to like different like men's adult magazines, which is kind of funny.
Wait, adult magazine? So it was like naked ladies on one page, and then you go to the next
and then
page.
Like Children of the Corn the next page. Like yeah, I don't really understand like where the where the I don't know, I guess where the juxtaposition would come, like where you think like someone's probably gonna want to look at naked ladies, and then also like have like this really like compelling, scary story afterwards. But
it brings a new dimension to the old joke of I read it for the articles. You're like, no, Stephen King wrote a story in this one. Like that's why I bought it. It's not for the tits, I swear.
Yeah. I actually do have one issue of Playboy that has a short Hellboy comic in it.
What a weird. Like I actually believe you got that for the Hellboy story because you're Hellboy daft. But
that is true. I am Hellboy daft. But so anyway, yeah, it's based on Stephen King's story, so that got me excited. And then I like Rob Savage, so like you said, he did host, which was really, really good. Directorial debut. Just a really tight, short little film that really, what do you call it? Like, made good work of its, premise and its limitations, all being done on Zoom. And then his follow-up Dashcam was okay. I don't think we did on the show, but
yeah, I've not seen Dashcam.
It's kind of like a typical found footage movie, but I mean, it's done well enough. There's some controversy because like the main character is like this kind of right-wing person, and I guess like the person they got to play her is kind of like that person in real life. So there's like some controversy, but I mean, if you don't mind that, if you just watch it, it's like, whatever. It's an okay enough found footage movie. Some people really like it, but I don't think it's great. But
I want to say that came out on your first paternity leave, and that's why it probably got overlooked because of that. Yeah.
So I don't love that one, but I also didn't hate it. But the director still has enough like good graces for me that I was excited for his next project. And then I actually also had like some friends who saw an early screening of this and said they really liked it as well and thought it was like really creepy and everything. So going into this, let's say before it came out, I was really excited, and then reviews started to trickle in, and it started getting more kind of meandering, like average, middle of the road kind of reviews and stuff. So I was deflated a little bit, but I still wanted to see it enough, which is, hence why, I went out to the theater and asked if you wanted to as well. So finally, so what did I think of the movie? I thought it was kind of bad. It's not the worst thing in the world. Like I've definitely seen worse, but I do think this has a lot of the generic Hollywood horror tropes that we kind of wrinkle our noses at a lot. I mean, we're talking about crappy like dream sequences, a lot of jump scares.
You have no idea how much I rolled my eyes when there was the wake up after something jumpy happens and oh no, wake up, it was just a dream. We're pretending it wasn't, but it was.
Yeah. I will say the stuff that maybe kind of elevates it a little bit for me and keeps it from me being like, oh, I hated it, sucks, is like I do think you have a really good cast, which helps a lot. And I still think Savage is a good enough director that I don't have as much qualms about some of the direction and whatnot, but I'm getting choked up just because
it's so emotional. Thinking about your
cough. Yeah,
think about your time with this film, you can't help but get emotional. I mean, I'll jump in and just be like, I didn't like it very much. It's like I think right from the get go, I wasn't that excited for it because it looked kind of generic and it looked like kind of the sort of thing that we really, but like I know I've been kind of sick of now for a long time with these types of movies that all feel like they're basically cookie cutter and feel the same. But I was hoping it would have its own little twist on it. I was hoping it would have its own little like gimmick or whatever to separate it from the supernatural. There's a demon in the house coming after people, and someone in the house doesn't believe the other characters, type of thing, right? Because we've seen this 100, probably 1,000 times at this point. Let's be honest. But as it was playing out, I was kind of waiting for it to have its its scares that stood out, because I think ultimately if you're going to do one of these stories, either you have to have a fun gimmick with how the horror in the story works, or you have to really, really, really care about the characters and have good direction in the scary scenes. And I think ultimately everything in this is pretty just kind of mediocre. I wouldn't say any of those things that I just said are really terrible, but I also don't think any of them stand out or are particularly good. I like Sophie Thatcher well enough. There's a couple of funny things with a little girl that gave me a good chuckle that I'll mention later, but yeah, I was like, I think by the end, like I was sort of just kind of lukewarm in the middle for like half the movie, and then I think it got worse as it went, because I thought it had some like, I won't say, I guess it's pacing, but it had this problem for me where it felt like
it's not super long too, like.
No, it's not, but it had this problem for me where it felt like it wasn't crescendoing correctly, where it felt like at certain points in the middle where we should be heightening things up and things should be like going deeper into the horror world, where we're kind of like pulling away from that and doing more like teenage drama stuff. And then when we did kind of catapult back into the horror for the third act, it felt like, well, you've not really, I don't know, I'm not here for this now. You've not set this up enough. I will say it does kind of circumvent the research scene trope by way of having a previous victim that they can go talk to instead.
There's no like Google or like library microfiche scene.
But that said, though, I do think all that stuff with the previous victim is some of the worst stuff in the movie. So it's not for the better.
And there's so much like dumb character choices in this movie where like there's so many points where I was asking like, all right, why is this character doing that? Like they should be smarter than that. Also like with the entity or monster or whatever, I had like so many questions of like, how do they know that about this? And like also like, what are the rules to this thing? It doesn't really seem to.
The rules, Tim. Thank you. The rules. The rules are very poorly defined, and even the ones they kind of do define, they don't use like in any interesting way.
One thing I did kind of like, which I was curious if this made you laugh as well, but this is another one of these movies that I feel like you like to reference, like with Halloween 4, where you just have these over the top bullies.
Yes,
that are like...
yes, yes. Oh god, and that's the other problem actually. Cause it's funny. I mean, I thought of this because you said Halloween 4, and I started hearing. And he's an orphan, and he's an orphan. And then I'm like, oh yeah. So a big plot point of this movie is that, or a setup of the movie is that the main family, the characters have just lost their mother like a month ago in a car crash. So much like in this, like I like Megan well enough, and I thought that was better than this. But one of my like slight critiques of that movie is that it was a bit depressing. In a movie that we're here for the fun killer robot, we have this depressing. Oh, as a kid depressed about her mum dying. And this kind of has that problem as well, where the tone is so like dour because it's all these people getting over the death of a loved one right from the start, and I'm like, like are we really doing this? Like, you have to really be good with your character writing to make me give a shit about this, because it's just such a depressing like tone to start with.
I mean, I'm gonna put my foot down right here, and I'm just gonna say I'm done with the horror trauma movies where like it's I didn't like it when Smile did it, and I don't like it when this movie did it, when it's like, oh yeah, there's a monster, but really the real monster is the trauma that we spread. Like, well, no, I mean,
I like there being layers. When we talked about the Evil Dead movies, I love talking about how Evil Dead 2013 is really about the addiction. I love talking, but I think
if it's done well,
I think here it's so on the nose, and like there's a moment like at the end of the movie that I kind of saw it coming to an extent, but the actual specific way it happened made me like I had to hold back a laugh. And you don't want me to be holding back a laugh because what you did was so over the top. So like we'll get into all that in spoilers, obviously. One thing I do want to say though, we said it circumvents like having the cliche research scene. Although there is something that's almost like a research scene, which made me laugh just because it was really specific to, well, me. So at one point, Sophie Thatcher, earlier on, before she even really knows that there's spooky stuff going on, she is watching like a psychic on YouTube. But it just so happened that the psychic woman on YouTube was Scottish, and I started kind of chuckling to myself because I'm like, oh, she's watching a Scottish person on YouTube. This is weird. I don't know how to feel about this. That this is your research scene in the movie. It's like someone watching Streams After Midnight to research their ghost. And I got a chuckle out of that.
I did think of you during that scene as well.
That's sweet. That's sweet.
I was like, is that Pete's mum? Did he get?
Why are you doing an English accent?
Because Rob Savage is English. So,
oh, is that right?
I presume. I don't know. Probably.
Very good. I think he is. Well, I mean, Host was all English characters, pretty much, right? So, so I think so. But anyway, so yeah, I don't think any of the scares are like. Honestly, there was moments in this film, and this is not necessarily a critique that this film deserves necessarily more than others. It just so happened that I'm so like sick of these now that there was moments in this movie where I was noticing that as it was building up to a scare and someone was looking down a hallway or creeping around and like something spooky was maybe going to happen in a minute, and the music was going with the strings, where I was just sort of starting to think like, even this music is so like interchangeable. Like this sounds the exact same as any other movie like this, where there's strings going as someone's looking around and something spooky's about to happen. And it's not that this movie's any more guilty of it than the other ones that I'm saying that it's the same as, but it's the sort of thing where I just like the fact that I was sitting thinking about that during one of these scenes in the middle of the movie kind of just shows the problem, that I'm just like, this is like, they all feel like the same movie at this point. So
no, I mean, I agree. Yeah, I was thoroughly underwhelmed by it.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. It's just really, really underwhelming. And I do that as a couple of stupid things towards the end. They did grate me a little, but we'll get into all the specifics as we get into the spoilers. I'm trying to think if there's any positive notes I want to end on before we go into spoilers, because I don't know if there is.
Yeah, I mean, again, the most positive thing I can probably say is the as again the cast is I think for the most part pretty good. And I don't know if you had a lot of people in your theater, but I had like a decently packed theater, which did kind of make it kind of enjoyable. Like just because like there's some people like laughing and shouting out, which usually I don't enjoy in a movie, but this it kind of made it fun. Like there was a very specific scene which I think a lot of people came out this probably like, oh yeah, that's like the big scary moment that is going to be remembered for the movie, which I'll just say it's the red light therapy scene. But like during that you see like a flash of someone, and like someone in the theater just yelled out, "You creepy bitch," and that just kind of made me laugh. And there was another part too, like when the bully gets maybe a little bit of like the comeuppance, like a lot of people like started clapping, which is kind of funny. So I don't know. There was a little bit of stuff like that seen with the crowd that I kind of enjoyed.
On that subject, I had so there was maybe like 6 or 7 people other than me in the theater. One pair of people was like a middle-aged mother and her teenage daughter, who I only noticed because they walked out halfway through. And it was the sort of thing where they got up and like both of them are going together and taking their bags, and I'm like, I think they're walking out. I don't think they're coming back. And I remember being jealous and thinking, oh, I wish I could just leave. But I need to talk about it on the show. I can't leave. There was also a couple of teen girls up the back of the cinema who a couple times in the movie took photographs with their flash on, so you just saw this like flash like in the movie theater, which normally would infuriate me, but by the point it was happening, I was so out of the movie, like I knew I didn't like it, so I was like, well, whatever, you're spacing this up a little bit, I suppose. But yeah, there was hardly anyone there. It was a dead showing. And annoyingly, there was no early showing, so I had to pay for a full price ticket, which especially cut deep on this one, honestly. Yeah. It's fine if I like the movie, but this hurt more.
Like none of the theaters you have near you, like they don't do any like membership programs, like we get like $25 a month and you can see as many movies as you want or anything like that. Like
no, that are there is ones that offer that, but they're far away enough that the travel negates the savings, so it doesn't really matter. I do have like a membership thing that gets me some credit back every time. Like, so I like when I had to go see Transformers: Rise of the Beasts recently for Ace, I got to see that for free.
To see.
I did, yeah. But you know, it was the new one, and we did all the previous ones. That was like a good couple of months of torture, to be honest. Like that was a gauntlet. Yes. I had to see Boogeyman as well. It's because you're making me see Boogeyman, you think, oh, that's justified. Yeah, you have to see that.
Well, not to mention too I saw quite a number of horror trailers before the movie that I was like, oh, we're gonna see that. We're gonna see that.
Yeah, I had that same feeling, but almost all of them, I also had the, I don't want to though.
Do you know what is this? Did you get the trailer for, was this movie A Haunting in Venice?
I did.
Did you get that one?
Do you know what's so weird? Is that started off and I'm like, okay, it's a horror movie with a bit of an impressive cast. And then eventually you see Kenneth Branagh with the mustache and I'm like, wait, is this a Poirot? How do you say his name? Poirot.
Yeah. Poirot.
Yeah. Is this one of his? And it is. You know, that's one of the famous stories. But it seems like they're actually treating it like a horror movie, despite the fact that it's the third in a series of like these mystery movies that are. I didn't see the second one, but I saw Murder on the Orient Express when that came out.
Okay.
And, it's not a horror movie, right? I assume Death in the Nile wasn't either, but. Now we have Haunted in Venice, and it looks like they're actually going for, like...
It looked like a horror movie to me. I mean, yeah. I think we might have to do it, which means we might have to go back and do the other two.
What? We can't do it. I'm not on board with this. If anything, I got relieved at the end because I went, we don't have to do this thing because it's the sequel to a non-horror movie. I was like, great, get out close. I got that. I got Take My Hand, or whatever that one's called with the hand ritual. And
which I think people are saying is supposed to be good. I don't know, like, looked kind of so to me, but it's getting some buzz.
What was that? I got a third one.
I got None 2.
I didn't get None 2. Oh, I got Insidious 5. That's what it was. Which is which is getting close. That's early July.
Spoiler alert. We'll probably do that one too.
I think we're going to try and squeeze that in. And then by that point, it shouldn't be too long until we're back doing regular recordings and.
Sure.
Bonus episodes. Tim sounds. Tim doesn't sound like he wants to, but he's doing it. Damn it! The patrons are gasping for bonus content. Tim, gasping.
Oh really? I'll give him some boners.
Don't call it Boko. Oh, what was the other thing you said the other day that annoyed me? Oh, you called Shudder Shuds. SHUDZ Shuds. Stop trying to make these. You're like that character in Mean Girls, except you've got a new thing every week that you're trying to get over.
Hey man, eventually I'll find the thing that'll make us pop, and that's what we'll be known for, and we'll be happy.
I don't want to be known for Boko. I don't want this podcast to be known for Boko. Or Shuds, or whatever other stupid things you've said in time. Alright, should we get into the spoilers for the Boogeyman? I think we probably should.
Let's do it.
Alright, spoilers from here forth. You've been warned. The movie opens what turns out to be one of the murders of the previous family, but it's a creepy scene with a kid in a crib, and like a voice coming from the closet, and then obviously it's just a spatter of blood, but it eventually strikes. But it kills off a kid technically in the first scene, which I guess is slightly ballsy. Yeah. But I think I was a little let down by this scene, which I know sounds weird to say for an opening scene, but I think I was hoping that the movie was going to convince me that I should be excited for the rest, and I don't think it did that.
You weren't like, yeah, baby died, let's go.
Well, no, but I was hoping I mean, I'll just say it. The Boogeyman himself is just a generic looking CG thing. When you eventually see him, you don't see a lot of them. Admittedly, they hold him back for a long time, but there's nothing special about him.
Yeah. So I was pretty bummed because I had heard Rob Savage on some podcasts and stuff, and he had said that they went to the creature designer who did the creature in The Ritual, which, if you remember, that had such a cool and unique design that I was like, oh hell yeah, the Boogeyman's gonna be some weird messed up looking thing, and then it's yeah, it just ends up looking like this really just kind of generic CGI thing. That I guess maybe one thing that's kind of effective is they keep it in the dark a lot of the time, which I guess kind of helps it. But when you do see it, it does look like a little silly.
It's just, it does the same thing. It opens its mouth really wide. It's the same shit. Like that's just how I felt a lot throughout this movie. I just feel like I was seeing tropes from movies from the past 10 or so years just over and over again.
Yeah.
And so that kind of sets things up, and then we cut to our main family. We have teen daughter played by Sophie Thatcher. She's like 17 or whatever, in high school. The little sister's like, I don't know, 8 or something. I don't know what age she's supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no idea.
The ages all blur together, honestly, to me.
I only know like the ages of like my kids, so like I could probably pick out a 2-year-old, but anything above that, I have no idea.
A 2 and a how many months?
He would be about 2 and 3 months at this point.
No, I mean the younger kid. Like how many?
Oh, the younger one, about 4 months.
4 months. Okay. I was gonna say that new kid's not 2 yet. No way that time has passed. It's freaking me out, Tim. Every time someone mentions that it's been 10 years since X movie, they don't hit me with.
Oh jeez, yeah.
Your second kid's already 2. So no, so we get the sadness. The dad's a psychologist. The older daughter and the younger daughter are both going back to school for the first time since the accident happened. So there's a lot of apparently like there's a therapy appointment this dad has with a patient because he's got like a home therapy office. He's got a patient before he takes his kids to school at the start of the movie, and I thought that was like, whoa, how early was this appointment? Especially since I think school in the US typically starts like an hour earlier than what I'm used to. Like school starts like 8 a.m. for you guys, like in most states, does it not?
Why it's in preschool, which starts at about 8.
That's nuts.
I think like regular school is about the same.
Yeah, school was always about 9 for me starting. So, but even the idea of like having an appointment with a patient at like 7:30 before you take your kids to school, like an hour later, just sounds insane to me.
Yeah, like what's he doing? Like he must like have to get up at the very least at like 6 to like get dressed and showered and stuff, because you can't like, if you're a psychologist, you can't like be all like schlubby and in your pajamas and stuff like when your patients come in. Of course.
And it doesn't sound like it's an emergency appointment, like the woman was having like a breakdown and had to see him. It feels like a casual this the next appointment kind of thing. I don't know, that was, I mean, it's not really a big deal, it's just something that I noted when it happened.
Hey, maybe she was in the mob.
What?
Man, like that shit. Like that show, The Sopranos, where the mob guy goes to a therapist.
What does that have to do with an early appointment?
I don't know. I was making a joke. You never watched The Sopranos?
I actually haven't. No, I'm familiar with the basic premise, but I've never watched The Sopranos.
No, I've never watched it either, but I think it's still a good joke.
I have seen Analyze This though, which is effectively the same thing, just more of a comedy.
Yeah, what was the deal with that? Did they steal the idea? Was that like a Walking Dead 28 Days Later scenario where like someone came up with the idea first, but it was just kind of like parallel thinking?
It was around a very similar time. Like they weren't that far apart. The start of The Sopranos and Analyze This must have been within like a year or two of each other.
Yeah.
Who knows? Well.
Do you think we should go to therapy?
Couples therapy, yes. We absolutely need that. All right, so yeah, so we see the teen girl. So I'll call her Sadie because that's her name. She goes.
Yeah, we'll call her this because that's her name. Yeah.
Well, just instead of saying Sophie Thatcher or the teen girl over and over again, I'll actually just call her Sadie.
The woman, the female.
What? Shut up, right? She goes to school and she tries to ignore everyone, and she finds like the lunch she had in her locker the day like her mum died, so it's like all moldy and disgusting and whatnot, and basically
looks fine to me.
Of course it did, but she ends up having an altercation with like this kind of bully character who's trying to tell her to like, oh, is it really healthy?
Move on.
Yeah. Is it healthy that you're wearing your mum's dress? Shouldn't you try to move on? I'm like, it's her first day back and you're judging her for still having like, you know, memories of her mom or whatever. I just felt weird.
The movie tries to play it like so serious, but I don't know, like to me it was like so over the top that it's kind of funny. Like you know, again, like we've talked about these kind of bullies where it's like, yeah, are you really gonna be bullying like this kid whose parents died? And it wasn't like, it didn't seem like she was like some nerdy outcast person that like,
no,
you know, would get bullied anyway. Like it's just like a very regular kid. Also, like I never understood like what her like relationship to these characters were. Like, were they friends before? Or like she kind of mentions before, like the one other girl she was like friends with, and then it seems like she got a little bit more popular, but then she's also like, well, these are your friends too. And I don't know, they seem like they all hate her, like probably even more after her mom died.
It seems like her best friend kind of developed this new group of friends and is still trying to keep touch with Sadie, but ultimately it's there's all this conflict where everyone else doesn't seem to like her, especially this blonde kid who seems to actually try to aggravate her. I think what's weird about this is that I'm okay, depending on the tone, having something that doesn't feel that real. But if you're doing we're doing the sad, the parent died, we're going for kind of like, we're trying to connect to these characters, like it just, I feel like the real scenario that happens if if someone's in high school and they have a parent who dies, and whether they're back in a week or back in a month, I feel like if anything, people will just kind of awkwardly try to stay away, except people who know her and try to talk to her. Like, I don't know, I feel like making these comments is just movie comical, like teen villain of like, I don't know, it rubbed me kind of the wrong way. But she ends up like, it's actually Sadie who pushes her, but it ends up like squishing the bag of the old lunch, and it goes all down her mum's dress that she was wearing to go back to school. Like, anyway, actually, before we go any further, I should probably just like outline what this movie's doing, right? Just so the dad is avoiding talking about the mother, which is a bit ironic because he's a therapist. And when he even takes the two girls to like their therapist, like the therapist for them is like, hey, you have to talk to them about their dead mom. And he's like, I'm not ready yet. Like, right? So the whole thing is that they're like, the trauma, as you put it earlier, of the dead mother and the grief of the dead mother is like pushing them all apart, and the dad's not wanting to talk about it, and the kids are basically having to deal with it on their own. And the boogeyman represents this like force of the trauma that they have to like take care of. And to the point where like there's some really on the nose stuff later on in the movie where when the dad's in danger, like Sadie's saying to her little sister, don't worry, we're not going to lose him too, right? We're not going to lose him to the grief, right? I think that's the word that I was thinking when I was watching the movie, was not trauma. I was thinking of the grief. Like that's what but it's the same thing basically, you know. So that's basically what it's doing, and I'm saying that because there's a lot of points throughout this movie where it's kind of like hitting you over the head with its analogy that it's working with.
Yes.
And yeah, so I appreciate the attempt to that, but it's so on the nose at points that it feels really forced.
It did not work for me at all. Like, especially with this type of movie, it's like, you know, sometimes like a monster can just be a monster. Like, just have like dumb fun with it. Like, it's the Boogeyman, you know. Like, I'm not expecting a serious meditative movie.
I think that's that's problem number one, is the use of the word Boogeyman, especially when it's said out loud. Because at first I thought they weren't going to actually ever say it. It's just like that's what the movie's called for marketing purposes. But there is the scene where someone eventually actually says it and calls them that. And even though they try to play it, because so just to jump ahead here, so Sadie, when she starts to suspect that something supernatural's going on, and the whole thing with this other family, the previous victim, is that the dad of that family comes to the house for therapy, but he kind of doesn't come with an appointment. He just kind of barges his way in. He literally breaks into the house, and then like, you know, daddy therapist Will is like, okay, I'll see you, sit down, let's talk about what happened. And he's like, yeah, everyone thinks I killed my kids because they died one after the other. And obviously this makes Will, you know, nervous because he's acting kind of stressed and like is talking about how everyone thinks he killed his kids. But he ultimately dies in their house in the closet, and it's the boogeyman that gets him, but it looks like a suicide. It looks like he hung himself in one of their closets. So this is like another traumatic event that they all go through. But when supernatural stuff starts happening and Sadie finds like the recorder of the interview, and he's talking about this force that comes from the closet, this thing that's killing people, and it kind of lines up with what the little sister's saying about what she's scared of. She goes to the family's house, right, where the previous like story happened, and she runs into the wife of the family, who's now the only living member of this previous family, and she's got a shotgun, she's got lights and candles everywhere, and I'm like, okay, you're trying to set up rules. Now, admittedly, the rules that this being is like held back with light, and like you have to keep the light on it, does feel a little bit like we've been here and done this a lot recently in the last like decade. You know, Lights Out was an example. You go further back to even something like Pitch Black. It's not a bad mechanic, it's a solid mechanic to use. The movie doesn't really do anything with it, though, I would say.
Right. So, I mean, the thing that bugs me about it is, all right, so you're setting up some type of like rule or boundary, so that's interesting, but also it feels like it doesn't matter, because it feels like the boogeyman can just like make a light bulb burn out or a candle flicker and go away, that like, you know, it seems very ineffective.
Yeah, it never feels like there's actually a good use of it where the characters can actually utilize it to try and outsmart the boogeyman, or whatever you want to call it. But anyway, I was building up to this because I think this character, the wife here, is the worst character in the movie. I think,
oh, for sure,
she's so over the top. She's doing like the gruff, like, you better hope you never find out what this thing is. And the moment where
I'm gonna be cryptic, even though I really should be telling you a lot of stuff right now so that you're prepared, but you know what, I'm just not gonna say anything.
And then there's a close-up of her face when she's like, they called it the boogeyman, and they try and play it like, Sadie, her reaction where she kind of looks at her like, are you for real? And then she's like, yeah, I used to look at my kids when they said that too, but now I learned the hard way not to. Like, even though they try to play it like Sadie reacts like that's a ridiculous thing to say, it doesn't stop it from just being lame. Like, it's still just lame. It doesn't matter if the character thinks it's a bit lame too in this case, because immediately the other character's like, no, you're going to believe by the end of this movie that this thing is real and it's the most terrifying thing ever. Like, they should have never used the name. Like, I don't think they should have even called the name the Boogeyman. I think it just it carries, I don't know, it carries this like history and weight to it that's just like this. It's the silly thing that people talk about, and that's kind of the point, is the way you make it scary. Like, it works in Halloween, right? Because in Halloween, obviously it's not about the boogeyman, but having the kid think he's the boogeyman works as a cute way for like a kid's perspective. But actually saying this thing is the legitimate boogeyman, and then the actress, or and I don't want to shit on the actress, it's not her fault, but then the character goes on to talk about, oh, and you know, I use candles because fire is the first thing. This is what the cavemen used to fight back against the boogeyman. And I'm like, shut up! This is so stupid. You're monologuing about cavemen and fire right now. It is.
It's like, how do you know? How do you know this? Like, no one knows anything about this like creature. Like, it's such bullshit.
So this is instead of the research scene, which I guess a slight thumbs up for that, but the scene itself is so bad and so ham-fisted that I just
It also like makes it kind of like, it reminds me a lot of like It too as well, which is like, granted, you know, that's another Stephen King thing, so maybe it's a little easier to compare it to, but like, you know, it's like, oh, this like, you know, creature from long ago that like feeds on your emotions. It's like it kind of just feels really like derivative.
Yeah, that's a good word. It feels very derivative. And this was the scene where I went from being lukewarm and thinking I'm just not really that into this to, okay, I actively don't like this now. I actually think this is bad. So, which is a shame. Once you have that turning point, you're like, yeah, sure, you're gone.
And like, I just hated too, like the whole like thing with her going to the house. It just felt like so that movie thing of like, no real person would do this, especially going by themselves. Like, why not have your friend come with you? You know, like, well, when you're going into like this,
drives her there. She just doesn't take her in the house.
Yeah, but like, the house itself is like, you know, if you are like a real person, like, going into this house is like, it's like very like scary because it's like so derelict, and like it obviously looks like someone is living there, but you don't know. Yeah, again, if they're like, you know, crazy or what. Like, I assume like, you know, there'd probably be like, you'd see like a homeless person or something like in there, or whatever. But I have no idea how she is like surviving in this house, because it doesn't look like she leaves it, but like there's just like so many like so much trash and like dishes and stuff piled up that's like, all right, like in between like trying to hunt down the boogeyman, is she like ordering food and like just like not like doing the dishes or whatever? But
yeah,
it's so funny. She writes her phone number down though on the refrigerator, like call me. Like I don't know who lives here, but call me.
Yeah, I mean, when she went upstairs and there's a bunch of candles, and they're all quite small candles, I thought, well, someone has to be here. Otherwise, I'm going to question how all these candles that are almost done are still staying lit. You know, there's some questions here with this. I really hated this stuff. And then to sort of skip ahead again later on, this woman does eventually call her, right, after some other stuff happens, and says, hey, I think I can kill it. Do you want to come and help me? And Sadie goes to her, and I'm like, this woman is so unhinged. This is clearly like she's using you for something. And sure enough, as soon as she gets in the house later on in the third act, this woman just grabs her and like, you know, knocks her out or hits her enough to like stun her at least, and like handcuffs her or ties her to like something because she wants to use her as bait to kill the boogeyman. And just before this happens, she's explained like, hey, watch the tripwires, because she's got like shotguns like lined up all over the house, like ready to like shoot this thing. And I think this bugged me as well, because I'm like, okay, this character's basically a nothing character who's just here for exposition and in this scene. But it also bugged me because it just kind of like established that, okay, you're going to have like 10 shotguns fire at it, and then it's going to be okay. So you're kind of just like confirming to me that there's not really any way to actually deal with them. Like, you know, like he's fine. Like he's going to be good supernaturally no matter. It's kind of like how he can just like make the lights turn off. Like nothing's really going to kill him. So,
well, like what's funny is like the way she talks about it. Again, she's very cryptic, but like she kind of says like, I have a brilliant idea. I think I know how we can kill it. But then like her idea is just like, we're gonna shoot it a bunch.
yeah. I've got an idea. Firepower. Yeah, I was expecting like some sort of mechanic or rule that she's figured out, but no, it was just I'm just gonna NRA it to death. Oh dear.
But yeah, I mean, like talk about like like no rules and stuff. Like I don't understand. Like the creature feels very like supernatural and magical. Like I like, is it using closets as like a doorway to transport to like other places or whatever? I don't know how it gets from like house to house, but it always
goes from a closet. Yeah. Is he at the Monsters Inc. like factory?
yeah, exactly.
Just going through doors. Is that what's happening here? This is actually just like one of his team members. This is, you know, Sully and whatever the other one was called.
I have no idea. Like, because at times it feels like it wants you to think like it's this supernatural being that has these powers that can go here to here. But then other times, it kind of makes it feel like, oh yeah, it's just a thing you can punch or light on fire like anything else.
It's just in the room. It's just in the darkness, so we can't see it, kind of thing. Honestly, the big thing for me is not like, you've set up the light rule, so stick to it and make them use that. And it feels like they don't really do that, which kind of sucks. And you know, we're kind of just like sticking thematically to the thing we're talking about. So I do want to bring up, so the caveman fire thing is actually set up. So there's two things that set up something at the end, right? And there was this feeling going into the third act where I'm like, oh god, this is going to be one of these movies where the ghost of the dead mom somehow helps them win at the end. Because there's a moment earlier on when she's looking through her mum's stuff, Mercedes finds her lighter, and she like, you know, flicks it on, and she's like, Mom, if you're here, like move the flame to the left. And it doesn't happen. There's like a spooky thing instead, right? So that sets it up, and then there's also the caveman fought this thing with fire. Like that was the first way people fought back against it. And so I'm getting to the third act, and the dad's been taken out of the basement, and like Sadie's going down to try and help him, and she ends up flicking the lighter open, and sure enough, the way the mum ends up helping, which was so that pays off both things, is that the flame of the lighter like goes huge to light up the room, and then like properly like fire back, and it basically turns into a flamethrower. Even before, like she grabs like an aerosol can and like starts actually using a flamethrower with it, and it's like okay, that's whatever, right? You're setting it on fire, And then when the can runs out, I love that the little sister comes up with like the turpentine or whatever it is and starts just like pouring it onto the boogeyman, which was one of two moments that I loved about this little girl. So one was her just like going full like psycho here at the end and like pouring, you know, something flammable on the monster. The other one was like after the first time something proper creepy happens to her, which I think is the scene from the trailer where she rolls the light ball down the hallway and she gets the jump scare. Which was probably one of the scenes you were talking about where it feels like, okay, there's light here, but the boogeyman just smashed the light, so if it can just do that, then what the hell, what does it matter? Yeah. But she runs down and goes to see her sister, and I laughed at this. I thought this was really funny in like a genuine way, where the little sister like kicks Sadie in the shin in such a strategic way that Sadie just goes down to the floor, like on her knees and like is in pain. And I thought, get this girl on the John Wick program. That was a precision strike. Like she got her down with one swift kick. It was really impressive. Okay, I got a chuckle out of that. Because what I'd expect was someone to like lift up their leg and start rubbing their shin because it hurt or something, but she just kind of like strategically goes down. I was like, oh, kid's got moves, like watch out. Maybe it's all that Star Wars training. I don't know. Did Leia learn martial arts or hand-to-hand combat? I don't know.
She's a decent fighter. Women can fight now. What do you want? It's 2000, baby. Yeah,
women can fight, but 8-year-old girls is a different matter, Tim.
So one thing I was gonna say that I did kind of like, but I don't feel like they ultimately do much with is I do like the idea that the boogeyman can kind of like mimic you, and I feel like
they did nothing with this.
Yeah, but like what I kind of liked is it kind of seemed like it was like it has to learn how to do it first, because you kind of hear it like struggling to sound like someone, and it kind of feels like it gets better as the movie goes on. So I thought that was an interesting idea, but yeah, like you just said, it ultimately like they don't do anything
like
with it.
Yeah, the very first scene, like you hear it do the dad's voice for the child, right? And it's like, hey, this is daddy's coming to get you, and then obviously the kid dies. And it's okay, it's setting up that it mimics voices, and I'm like, okay, you can do something with that can be fun, but I feel like it never really does anything at all with it. No one ever really has a moment where they're proper tricked. Like whenever it happens, like the person's always on edge, like that doesn't make sense why I'm hearing my dad or I'm hearing someone's voice. I guess the obvious thing that it didn't do, I suppose, is do the mum's voice, but I guess that makes sense because the mum's not here to learn, which I guess is that is kind of interesting if they stuck to that and like did something with it, but they, it's just I don't know.
So
yeah, how'd you go?
I mean, I don't know if I guess we're kind of skipping around a little bit, but so what do you think about that scene at the therapist's office? Because I feel like that's like a scene like people will remember as being like very creepy, but to me it felt like so set up. Like
that was my problem with
I couldn't really enjoy it.
Yeah, that was my problem with a lot of the horror in this, is that like obviously we want them to have inventive scares and use their surroundings and items to like do fun stuff, but I feel like a lot of the horror in this felt very contrived with like the items that were being used or whatever, and this was one case where because she's scared of the dark, they're doing like this weird therapy where they've got like a red cube that lights up but it flashes, so there's like a moment of darkness and then a moment of red light, and all I could think was like, is this a real therapy technique? Because it feels so made up for a horror movie, it doesn't.
Oh yeah,
like
because it's one of those things where like it's already scary. Like it would be scary to me as an adult, so why would you use that as like a cure for like an 8-year-old who's afraid of the dark? Like if an adult is finding it scary, I don't think like that that's necessarily a good thing to do for a child.
And the therapist, because it's the two sisters together who are getting therapy, and like the therapist is this sweet middle-aged woman who couldn't be more gentle, right? But there's a moment when this red light is flashing on and off, but there's a shot of her looking down at the girl, and she looks so creepy in this red light.
And so that's when the person in the theater yelled out, "You creepy bitch!"
But because it's this low angle shot, and they're intentionally doing this thing where she's kind of smiling creepy at her, and it's like, like why are we doing it? fundamentally, one of my problems with these like supernatural demon movies is and they kind of actually try and just say this in this movie where the boogeyman likes to play with his food, where he like just wants to like mess with you and scare you until he eventually comes for you. But that's my problem in all these supernatural movies, where a lot of the scares feel like none of them like add up or like mean anything. Like they're just kind of random scares until it's eventually time for the third act where he's actually going to properly come after you. Like the odd good movie will do a thing where it feels like, oh no, it's a gradual thing where it's building up to the thing where it feels you can see what the logic is from start to end. But this is just he likes to mess with the characters until he eventually says, oh, it's time to just like feast on their soul or whatever it is.
Well, see, Pete, what you don't understand is that in the time of the caveman, there used to be a thing known as...
Oh, dear.
Another thing too is I'm not sure. I don't know if you got a sense like how long this movie takes place. Like it feels like it's a good amount of days. But like to me, like the thing that kind of felt weird is it feels like at first like the younger sister Sawyer, I think her name was, like at first it seems like she's the target, she's in danger, but then it kind of seems like it just switches to Sadie, and then it kind of feels like okay, so what has Sawyer been doing like these last couple of days, like where Sadie's been getting like tormented and scared and stuff? Like has she just been chilling out and like not trying to like tell people or like you know what I mean, like freaking out? Like it seems like weird that it's just kind of like all right, like is she chill now? Like
it feels like it's ignoring her for a little while. And obviously the whole thing is that the dad isn't listening to them, and that's a stand-in for him like trying to ignore their pain until like he's forced to deal with it at the end, and then like they all work together and like they literally watch the house burn with all the mum's belongings in it to find this is them finally moving on and like be able to move on with their lives and whatever, which is all fine, although it still does that bullshit thing. Like this is another super generic thing that I really just rolled my eyes at right at the very end, where we have the scene where they all go to therapy together and the dad's able to talk about how he feels, and it's like, okay, happy ending, you've solved the trauma. But we have to do the thing where Sadie looks back and the boogeyman might still be in the closet. We have to do that little tease at the end, the sequel bait or the one last scare. And like not every horror movie needs that. And even good movies, like, I'll say it, like the final scene of A Nightmare on Elm Street, like that's a great movie, obviously. Great movie. But that ending where Freddy just jumps out for one last scare, it's kind of lame. It's just kind of a stupid tacked on little scene. And that's been a problem with horror movies since at least the 80s, maybe further back, but like if anything, it's just worse now because it's like all these supernatural movies basically do it, where they do their one last little scare where maybe the thing's not really defeated, which just makes me go, well, what was the point? What was the point of all this if the thing's still there?
At the very least, at least you don't get a giant CGI monster like leaping out at the camera.
True. Like, and the argument's going to be it's symbolic because she slams the door at the end, but to basically say, "Hey, trauma, you don't own me anymore." Like I'm better now. Like I get like thematically what you could read it as, and I think all of that stuff on paper is completely fine. And I do like when movies try to add meaning to what they're doing, but when some of it's just so on the nose and over the top, and when I don't think the horror stuff is original or particularly well done, and it's all just kind of lukewarm, all the stuff where it's like what it means comes across kind of like almost annoying, because it's like, oh, we're being smart because we've got all this like subtext, and it's like, okay, I appreciate the attempt, but it doesn't work on a surface level, so the subsurface doesn't satisfy me either, like it has to work as the horror movie first, and then you have the layers underneath, and sadly it doesn't. So we can go back and talk about some other things though, because there's a bunch of stuff that we've glossed over. There's two actually
big scenes that we need to bring up. So I mean, one is, I guess it's not super important, but I do want to talk about the scene with her and her friend in the bathroom.
With her holding hands over the cubicle.
Yeah, there's one thing she says in particular that made me go, huh. I don't know if you agree, but like, Sadie's like, she's like despondent and like very sad, and she's just on the toilet just kind of like listening to music and whatever, and her friends trying to like cheer her up and get her to talk, and she says something along the lines of like, like she's like peering over at the top, and like Sadie's kind of like, oh come on, I'm in the bathroom or whatever, and she says something like, oh come on, we're best friends, I've seen you pee 1,000,000 times. Like, did that stand out to you as being kind of weird? Like,
I mean, women go to the bathroom
1,000,000 times.
Women go to the bathroom together a lot, I guess. Maybe they. No, I'm cracking.
They all leave the doors open and look in the mirror at each other.
Yeah, I'm cracking a joke. Yeah, well, yeah. Even if you're sitting talking to each other while you're both having a piss, you're in different cubicles, and otherwise, if it's not a cubicle, then you're at home. So you're just standing in the bathroom at home while someone's sitting there having a piss. Like that's weird too. No, I agree. That's an odd thing. Well, this was actually one of my problems with when I talked about the momentum and the crescendo of the horror. I felt like at this point in the movie where we're sort of deep in Act 2, we should be like cranking up the horror part of it, right? And instead, we have to like take this like almost break to be like, hey, I'll bring the girls over. We'll spend it. We'll have a party together, and you realize that you're still friends with them, which was annoying just from the perspective like, okay, it's obviously going to go bad, and they're all like. We're going to have the awkward ending where they all pick on her, and it's going to be, shit for her.
And no one's taking this boogeyman seriously. Like, if you have a boogeyman in your house and you invite like 4 or 5 of your friends over, I'm sorry, you're a shit friend. Like, I'd be like, hey, let's have a night out, but let's do it at your house, okay? Like, I get a boogeyman of mine.
Yeah. Honestly, the most interesting thing about all this is that the little sister was told by her dad, hey, we're going to give your big sister a chance to have a nice night so you can play PlayStation all night. He said that, right? And being a nerd, I was looking to see if the controller was actually a PlayStation controller, because like movies do that all the time where they just use the wrong one. Honestly, I could never actually, it was in the dark, but they do this thing where she's playing a game that whenever she fire, I didn't recognize the game, but whenever
I do.
Oh, you do? Okay, go on. What is it?
Yeah, it's a game called Pathless, which it wasn't a big game, but it was from like the same people that did like Journey and Abzu.
Oh, okay,
So yeah, it's I only know it because I really liked Abzu, and then I bought Pathless, and it's not bad, but I never got as into it as the other games.
Well, she's got this weapon in the game wherever she fires it, the screen lights up because like a firework goes off or something like that.
To be fair, this is kind of a fun mechanic.
This is a fine mechanic, but it's very contrived, like a lot of the other scares in the movie, though. Because all I could think was, you're scared of the dark, so why are you sitting playing the video game in an otherwise completely dark room where the only light source is
extremely
the TV?
Dark.
Like, don't get me wrong, that's what I do because I like watching stuff in the dark. But your entire thing, the whole movie, is that you have 1,000,000 nightlights because you're scared of the dark. So why are you sitting in a completely dark room playing the game? Like, that just struck me as odd.
Yeah, and also like made me like wonder like how big is this house, because like eventually she gets attacked by the boogeyman, but it feels like it's like forever for the dad and the mom the dad and the sister to like to get to her. Like they finally get to her and it's like, oh my god, what happened? But it's like, is the house that big that like you heard her scream or whatever, and like you weren't there in like 2 seconds?
Not even just that, like this almost the exact same time is when the friends like force Sadie into the closet where the guy killed himself at earlier in the movie, and then seemingly, which again
is like who are these friends?
I know, they're horrible. Right? And then like the bully's like, oh, she's being dramatic because she's complaining about all this, but like they lock her in a room and she's screaming and banging on the door to get let out, and then like they have a whole fight. She slaps her and like they're yelling bitch at each other, and I'm like, how is the dad not hearing some of this?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like they're in the same house. Like how the rooms in a house do not contain that much sound. Like you can hear anything loud that happens in another room, unless you've got like a mansion with wings.
Let them have the night alone.
Yeah. What it's like Thunderdome. Once they're in the Thunderdome and of her bedroom, what goes on there's not my business. They have to like deal with it themselves. All of that.
Also, like they set this bully girl up to be like so mean, and this is like all the comeuppance she gets. She gets slapped in the face. Like she should at least have like her own like maybe she doesn't have to die, but at least have her own like little mini encounter with the boogeyman or something, just to like freak her out or something.
Yeah, on that subject as well, this is the last time you see the best friend as well. The best friend leaves with the other girls, and there's never like a moment. So it feels like the ending to this is that she's just lost her best friend, and like there's no resolution where you say like the bully girl gets comeuppance or learns the error of her ways, or the best friend like sides with her and says, okay, F those, like, because you would think at this point she'd be like, yeah, okay, like maybe she leaves here because okay, like, it feels like Sadie's acting crazy, but like you would think she'd come back and be like, you know what, I've been forcing these other friends on you, I should just be there for you, kind of thing. But she just leaves the movie. That's it. She's gone at this point. So it doesn't feel like there's much of a payoff to that either, bizarrely.
And you know, and thinking about this scene now, I completely forgot this happened. But like another thing that just makes no sense is like, so at the start of the scene, she reveals that she has like a joint that was like her mom's, and they're kind of like,
which by the way looked ancient and moldy and not safe to use, but yes, go on.
Like I don't know much about weed, but like like I wouldn't want to use something that was like it looked like it was like 5 years old or something.
It wasn't even like a specific thing. It was just like it was just collecting dirt and dust for a long time. So whatever.
But then like they're kind of like passing it around, and then like she inhales, she starts choking, and then she ends up like getting her sister's baby tooth that was pulled into the closet like caught in her throat.
So there was a scene earlier where they do the whole string on the door handle to pull out the little sister's baby tooth, which by the way I have never understood how you tie that around your tooth well enough that
I thought the same thing. I was like, how the hell do you do that?
Which is not unique to this movie. I've just always thought this. I'm like, how do you even tie it around the tooth, especially strong enough that it'll actually keep hold of it when it's pulled, but whatever. But we see the boogeyman like pull it into the closet, and it comes out of her mouth, which is a little disgusting. But
it's just like that's one of the boogeyman's powers, I guess.
It feels so random. It feels like just a random horror movie thing rather than something that's like specific to what they've set up that this thing can do. It just like it's painfully generic and derivative is basically what I'd say about it. It's not the worst of its kind, don't get me wrong. There is definitely worse, much worse even. But like I am so sick of these types of movies at this point, and it's just so by the numbers and just slots into any of them. And like I said, you could take the music from this movie and swap it with another movie of its type, and I bet it would work. You could take the creepy music for the suspense scenes and just swap it with the other ones, and they all sound the same. And it just it's got no identity of its own, sadly.
Yeah, I mean I think the worst part about it is that like. I just feel disappointed because like I expect so much more from everyone, because like I like the director, I like the actors, again based on Stephen King story, which I mean in terms of adaptations, I mean he has so many stories and movies and stuff that like his adaptations are all over the place. Sometimes they're amazing, sometimes they're god awful, but I feel like a lot of the times, or at least even the bad ones though, like are kind of like fun to watch. But this was just so generic. And then I don't think we mentioned like the script writers, but I think they actually had some pretty good writers on it. Like I believe it was the guy that I think it was the original script was from the guys that did A Quiet Place, which was a movie I think we both enjoyed. And then I think after
but I clicked on the first guy. He did A Quiet Place, but he also did 65, which came out earlier this year. That was not good, Tim. I'll just
okay,
make that clear.
And then I could be wrong, but I think after them there was another person on it that did the rewrite, which I think was the guy that did Black Swan.
Yeah, Black Swan,
which I like. I thought it was I like that movie. I mean, I don't know. I guess writing is can be kind of dodgy because whatever, like things can change. Like so, like
Although weirdly, other than one other movie, like almost nothing since Black Swan. Did a movie called Skeleton Twins, which is not anything like either of these.
That's crap. What's his name? This is the guy that does Barry.
Oh, Hader. Bill Hader?
Yeah, it's Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig, where like suicidal twins or something. That was kind of like a good dramedy movie.
And then he worked on a TV show, and that's all he's done since Black Swan.
Yeah. Interesting. But I don't know, like like at the very least, it's like it's something there. It's not just like someone that did like the Seventh Children of the Corn sequel. It's like, oh, like they actually had like at least one decent thing under the belt. But again, like it's a lot of people that I would think would do better than.
Well, I think I'm not surprised to hear that it was a short story that King did, because I can imagine it being like just one short story about a kid hearing a voice from the closet that eventually gets them or something like that.
Well, no, I can tell you exactly what it is. The scene where I forget the actor's name because it's kind of like long, like down damn something. He plays Lester Billings, but basically the guy that comes in,
the dad of the previous family.
Yeah. So that scene with him going into the therapist's office, that's basically the whole short story. Like, okay, like if you just take like whatever that 5-minute scene, and then it has a little bit of a different ending. Like it's been so long since I read it, but I believe it's like he comes in and he's talking about the boogeyman to the therapist, and then I believe the ending is like the therapist like secretary comes in, and then she sees that like the boogeyman is like dressed up as the therapist or something like that, or like the therapist is the boogeyman. There's something along those lines, but essentially it's basically just that like 5-minute scene or whatever, and then they built like a 90-minute movie around it. It
doesn't surprise me that it was a focused thing. That I can imagine that on its own, this creepy story of this guy coming in talking about a monster, but he might have just killed these kids. Maybe it's ambiguous as to whether he did or not. Like I can see that being quite a tense thing on its own. Mm-hmm. But I think the problem is like the rest of this movie is just the cookie cutter. Like here's a supernatural horror movie from the last decade or so, and we're just going to fill in the blanks, and here it is. Like there's nothing special or unique about it. It's
I agree.
Exceptionally generic. It's unfortunate. Obviously, we would have hoped for more, but it feels like we have at least a couple of these every year that we just get to complain about. I would love nothing more than to be pleasantly surprised. I hope Insidious 5 is good, because 4 sucked, but I like that franchise, so.
I think we'll get a few like surprises, throughout the rest of the year. There's some stuff I'm looking forward to, but yeah, I tried to tamper my expectations once I started hearing about the reviews and stuff, but I don't know. I was still like pretty let down by this. Honestly, I felt a little bit more positive coming into the review, but I mean, the more we talk about it, the more just the bad stuff stands out a lot more than like any of the okay stuff.
My curve watching this was kind of lukewarm, and then we get to the woman talking about cavemen and the boogeyman, and it kind of plummeted, and it never recovered from there. And I was kind of like rolling my eyes or even laughing a little bit at some of the things that it did after that. So rough time. So I suppose we should rate the boogeyman out of 10.
Like I said, I think coming in I was maybe more like kind of straight down the middle, thinking maybe 5-ish, but the more we talk about it, the more kind of angry or I get. So I think I'm actually gonna go down just to a 4. It's a shame. Like I mean I definitely don't think it's worth going out to the theater.
No. Honestly, Tim, when you said I want to go see the Boogeyman, let's do an episode on it, and I'm like, really, that one? Okay, I'll do it, because I'm always game to get an episode in, but
right. But I mean, there's really not much I can say about it. Again, the only thing like I feel it's like somewhat redeeming is that the cast is pretty good, but I mean, the best cast in the world, if you have like a good material to bring to life or whatever, I mean, what good does that do you? It's really just playing on all the tropes that we've just talked about time and time again that we just don't like.
And it never feels like it has its gimmick. It feels like a movie that wants to have a gimmick where this is this movie's thing. And given the guy did host, that had a gimmick. That was the gimmick was the Zoom call, right? Even Dashcam, by the sounds of it, has its gimmick of how it does its found footage. But
right, yeah, like, and I think because like I think most of, if not all of, like Dashcam was not done on like an iPhone or something like that. So So I mean, maybe it works. Maybe Rob Savage works better when he's actually like writing the material, and or like he has like a gimmick or a limitation, versus now when he's just doing like a studio script and doing a studio horror movie or whatever. But I feel bad because he's a very likable person. I've listened to plenty of podcasts with him on it, and he's definitely passionate about like movies and horror, and it seems like he had a good time making it, but it's unfortunately it just didn't deliver. And like you said, it just like everything about it just feels so like derivative of other movies. Like it's like Lights Out, it's like Smile, it's like all the I don't know, Darkness Falls. Like it's like
what a jab, what a shot across the bow.
It's I don't know, is it better than, I don't know, do you remember like in the early 2000s there was a Boogeyman movie?
I never saw the Boogeyman from the early 2000s, but I remember it reviewing horribly.
I saw it, and I could not tell you what it is about. It's like I saw it when it came out, but it was like completely left my brain. But I don't know, maybe that's something we should do at some point. But yeah, I'm sure it's terrible. This one's probably better than that. I'll give it that a little bit of a compliment.
I mean, that's faint praise, but yeah. So, I mean, that's basically
my score was 4. If anyone forgot.
4 out of 10. Oh yeah, I started rate. I thought we were done with the ratings. I think in my head I was kind of like down to a 5 quite early in the movie, but like we've said, like by the end it plummeted a bit more. So 4 feels about right, because it's not as painful as some other movies we've done, certainly, but I do not think it's good. I think it's thoroughly in the bad camp. So I think 4 out of 10 feels right to me. So
shame.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So we are still using the backlog of pre-recorded episodes. There's not actually that many left now, but this will be slotted in, and then we'll be back to the pre-recorded ones. But we might slot in an Insidious 5 review. And I suspect that by October season we'll be back doing regular episodes and regular bonus content for the patrons. So hopefully you enjoyed the discussion. We will see you soon with more horror movie discussions. But yeah, over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV you can support the content. Bonus episodes will come back later in the year, but there is a back catalogue of about 40 of them, plus about 12 even more streams, which will also be back once we're back doing regular recordings. So look forward to that. I'm looking forward to even more streams coming back, just so I've got an excuse to watch more random horror movies every month.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, the my horror watching has been pretty down lately. Like I've my wife and I have been catching up on like a lot of like TV and stuff, and we've been watching like random movies here and there, but I actually haven't been watching as much horror stuff lately, so I'm trying to get back in the groove of that and trying to work on some of my like Shudder and Screambox back catalog. But it'll be nice once have more reason to do it.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of video games recently, so I think my movie watching outside of the stuff for review has been a little bit down. But hey, so all that to look forward to. More streams before long, do not worry. But that is our discussion on the Boogeyman. Let us know what you thought of it in the comments if you've seen it. And of course, if you can't support us financially over on Patreon, that's okay. You can like, subscribe, you can ding the bell for notifications, you can share us on social media. Any and all of these things do help. But first and foremost, just watch everything. Multiple times even if you want.
Please.
All good. But that is the show, so thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.
See you later, freaks.